The sky is still blue. No thunder. No warning clouds rolling in from the horizon. Just ordinary light on ordinary ground while the earth underneath it is anything but ordinary. Genesis says the land is filled with violence. Not a few bad days. Filled. And then you're standing near one man who's hearing something that doesn't sound like a sermon. It sounds like a sentence. God speaks about what he sees. About what humanity has become. And the strangest line slips in almost too heavy to hold. God is grieved in his heart. Noah absorbs that silence after the words. Then comes the command. Build, not a small boat. A structure so large it will look like madness on dry ground. Measurements. Rooms. A door. A window. A coating of pitch inside and out. The kind of detailed instructions you give when you mean this will actually happen. And in the middle of it, 3 familiar Bible words show up like they're supposed to explain everything except they don't. Noah is called blameless. The ark is made from gopher wood. And God says he will establish a covenant with Noah before a single drop falls. You've heard those words 100 times. You can picture the animals. The rainbow. But what if those Sunday school labels have flattened the story? What if the Hebrew is signaling something sharp or something legal, moral, even cosmic hidden in plain sight? Here's what the Bible actually teaches in Genesis chapters 6 to 9, and it's easy to miss because the story is so familiar. The common misconception is simple. Noah is just the good guy, gopher wood is just some lost species of lumber, and covenant is basically God's sweet promise after the flood. But the Hebrew words don't let you keep it that small. When Genesis calls Noah blameless, it uses a term that points to wholeness and integrity, someone undivided. Not sinless perfection, not a superhero. A man whose life isn't fractured the way the world around him is fractured. And gopher wood. The text doesn't treat it like trivia. It sits inside a passage that reads like real engineering dimensions, compartments, and then this repeated emphasis on ceiling and covering. The point isn't, guess the tree. The point is preservation. God's rescue is not vapor. It has grain, weight, texture. Then there's the biggest word most readers place in the wrong spot: covenant. In Hebrew it's *baret*, a binding, relational legal bond. And Genesis says God announces it in advance. I will establish my covenant with you. Before the rain, before the ark floats, before Noah has proof. That means the flood is not God losing his temper. It's not a random reset button. The story is framed as decreation and recreation under God's kingship. The world that was ordered in Genesis chapter 1, boundaries, separation of waters, land emerging, begins to unravel. And in the middle of that unraveling, God binds himself to preserve life through one household. That image you pictured Noah building under a clear sky? Beneath it is covenant language, integrity language, and creation language all working at once. So if you want to read Noah as more than a moral tale about obedience, you have to slow down and listen to what the Hebrew and the ancient world are actually saying. And that starts with the world Noah lived in, because Genesis knows the flood stories of its neighbors, and it responds to them with precision. It's not an accident that the flood story sounds like something the ancient world would recognize. In the cultures surrounding Israel, there were flood tradition stories where the gods send waters that wipe out humanity, and one man survives by building a vessel. That's why, when you hear Genesis, you get that strange feeling of familiarity even if you've never read those other accounts. But Genesis isn't borrowing to entertain. It's speaking into a world already full of flood theology. And here's what everyone gets wrong. They assume similar means same. Genesis makes the differences shout. There isn't a squabbling crowd of deities. There is one God, and his reason is not divine irritation. It's moral judgment. The text repeats words like corrupt and violence to tell you the problem isn't that humans are noisy or multiplying too much. The problem is that the earth has become a habitat for bloodshed. Then Genesis frames the flood with creation language on purpose. In Genesis chapter 1, God separates waters and sets boundaries so life can exist. In Genesis chapter 7, the fountains of the great deep burst and the windows of the heavens open. That's not just rain, that's the undoing of separations. Boundaries collapse. The world moves backward toward watery chaos. Noah, then, isn't just a survivor with good construction skills. He's positioned as a kind of new start figure in the storyline of creation. Notice how the ark carries kinds of animals. how life is preserved through ordered instruction, how the waters prevail, and then recede, and how dry land appears again. Those are echoes of Genesis chapter 1 you're meant to hear. And when the flood ends, Noah's world is not simply back to normal. It's a reset with scars. The human heart is still a problem. Yet God chooses to stabilize the world anyway. That's the theological punch. Judgment is real, but it's not pointless. It is aimed at corruption, and it clears space for creation to continue under God's rule. But once you see Noah as a man standing at the hinge point between decreation and recreation, the description of his character starts to matter in a new way, because Genesis uses a very specific word to tell you what kind of man can carry that weight. So the camera moves closer, from the violent earth to the one life described as different. Genesis chapter 6 verse 9 doesn't just say Noah was nice. It stacks 3 phrases. Noah was righteous, he was blameless, and he walked with God. That middle word, blameless, is the Hebrew tamim, and it doesn't mean flawless like a polished mirror. It means whole, complete, undivided. You can hear it in how the Bible uses the same word elsewhere. An acceptable sacrificial animal is tamim *, not morally pure, but without defect, not divided, not compromised. When the word is used for a person, it points to integrity, the life that isn't split into public religion and private corruption. That's why the line immediately adds, in his generations. It locates Noah in contrast. The air he breathed was corruption, the ground was filled with violence, everyone around him is described as ruined. Noah is the outlier not because he never sinned, but because he isn't participating in the unraveling. His loyalty isn't fractured. And then comes the phrase that often gets spiritualized into something vague. Noah walked with God. In Hebrew, walk is a normal verb for how you live. It's relational and directional. You're going somewhere with someone. It's the same kind of language used for Enoch earlier, another man whose life runs on a different track than the world around him. Put it together and the text is making a claim that's quieter than perfection but stronger than good guy. Noah is covenant material. He's the kind of human life that can be entrusted with preservation because his life is coherent. His obedience is not a sudden heroic moment, it's the outward shape of an undivided heart. And that changes how you read the flood story. The ark isn't a prize for being the best person on earth. It's the vessel through which God preserves life by partnering with a man marked by integrity. But now a question hangs there. If Noah's integrity matters, why does the text spend so many words on materials, on a strange gopher wood, on sealing and coating, on the physical reality of rescue? The next Hebrew detail answers that, and it's more deliberate than most readers realize. You've seen Noah's world, and you've met Noah's integrity. Now the text gets painfully specific: wood, measurements, pitch. And one rare Hebrew word sits there like a clue, waiting to be heard. Because Genesis won't let the rescue stay abstract, God's mercy comes with blueprints. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood, the text says, and the Hebrew term behind gopher is gopher *, a word so rare that the Bible doesn't hand you an easy definition. That's why people turn it into trivia. What tree was it? What species? But the story doesn't pause so you can play lumber detective. It keeps moving through a sequence of commands that sound like a real build. Dimensions, internal compartments, a door, a window, and then the repeated insistence on sealing. In other words, the emphasis isn't on romance. It's on preservation. Watch what happens next. Genesis chapter 6 verse 14 pairs the command to build with a command to coat. Cover it inside and out with pitch. The Hebrew for pitch is *gopher *, a word that sounds strikingly close to *gopher. That doesn't prove the wood means pitch wood, but it does tell you the text wants your ear to catch something. Gopher, gopher. Wood, covering, structure, sealing. And sealing matters in the ancient world. A vessel isn't a vessel until it holds back the waters. So the ark is described less like a sleek ship and more like a huge, ordered container built to survive not waves but judgment waters. The point isn't speed, it's endurance. It's the difference between floating and failing. That makes Noah's obedience feel heavier. This isn't build a cute boat. This is slow faith in tangible form: cutting, joining, coating, waiting while the sky stays bright and the world stays violent. And it reframes how God rescues. He doesn't only speak life into existence like Genesis chapter 1. Here, he also instructs life into preservation. Ordered materials, ordered spaces, A covered refuge. But that raises the sharpest question in the whole passage. If the ark is this carefully designed refuge, what is it designed to serve? A one-time escape plan? Or something covenantal, something God is binding himself to before the first hammer strike has even finished echoing? Noah stands in a world coming apart. Not because God is careless, but because evil is real, violence has weight, corruption has consequences. Genesis refuses to call that normal. It calls it what it is. And then, in the same breath, Genesis refuses to say the last word is chaos. Tamim *, a whole life becomes the place where God anchors preservation. Gopher *, and Kofer *, wood and covering become the reminder that grace is not imaginary. It takes shape. It builds. It seals. And *, covenant means the rescue was never a last-minute improvisation. God binds himself to hold the world together even while he judges what is killing it. That is the hidden coherence most readers miss. The flood is not a child's tale about being nice. It's a window into the character of God. Morally awake, grieved by violence, patient enough to instruct, powerful enough to unmake, faithful enough to reorder, and committed enough to pledge stability to a creation that cannot keep itself stable. And the Bible keeps echoing this pattern: judgment that confronts evil, and mercy that builds an ark-shaped refuge. If this kind of close reading opened the text for you, Hebrew words, ancient context, and the deeper theology hiding in plain sight, there's more where that came from. Stay with this channel by subscribing, and keep going deeper into Scripture with the friend who won't let the details stay flat.